What's a harsh truth that humans refuse to accept? Story 1. Some things just stop working. One of the harshest truths people avoid is that sometimes things fall apart for no dramatic reason at all. No betrayal, no big fight, no villain, just change. People grow in different directions, or one person changes while the other stays exactly the same. And eventually, the connection that once felt effortless begins to strain until it finally breaks. It's a quiet kind of heartbreak, the kind that comes not from wrongdoing, but from entropy. This truth hits hardest for those who've watched it unfold up close. I know someone whose parents slowly drifted apart despite doing everything right, and it left him terrified about ever settling down. He wants to grow old with someone someday, but their marriage taught him a lesson he never asked for. Even love can stop working, and sometimes there's no one to blame. Story 2. Good people don't always get good lives. Another brutal truth. You can do everything right and still end up with a life that feels unfair or completely derailed. Someone shared their story. They worked hard, earned a degree, paid their taxes, followed every rule they were told would lead to stability. Then disability struck. It took 3 exhausting years just to qualify for support, and now they're painted as a burden by the same system that failed them. Most of their income disappears immediately. Half to rent, a quarter to medication. They did everything they were supposed to do, and still lost. This truth is painful because it shatters the comforting illusion that morality, effort, or education guarantees security. It doesn't. Life isn't a meritocracy, and that's one of the hardest pills we'll ever swallow. Story 3. People have said things about you that you will never hear. A harsh reality. People have said cruel, unfair, ridiculous things about you behind your back. Even people you barely interacted with. Even people you were kind to. A friend of mine, genuinely one of the nicest people you'd ever meet, once confronted a guy who clearly disliked him. He approached him honestly, asking, "What did I do to upset you?" The guy shrugged and said, "You walk around smiling like you think you're better than everyone." That was it. That was the reason. After that moment, my friend stopped worrying about whether people liked him, because he finally understood something brutal but liberating. People will dislike you for reasons that have nothing to do with reality, reasons you could never predict, reasons you couldn't fix even if you wanted to, and once you realize that, you stop trying. Story 4. Competence doesn't determine who gets promoted. There's a widespread belief that the higher someone is in a company, the more competent they must be. In reality, the correlation between skill and position is incredibly weak. This is the Peter principle in action. People get promoted based on how well they performed their last job, not the job they're being promoted into. They rise and rise until they land in a role they're actually bad at. Then they stop moving and stay there indefinitely. Corporate hierarchies slowly fill with people who are excellent at what they used to do, but totally unfit for what they do now. Michael Scott from The Office is the perfect example. He was an amazing salesman, but a terrible manager. The promotion broke him, not because he wasn't capable, but because it pushed him into a job that didn't match his strengths. Real life is full of Michaels. Story 5. Getting hired often has nothing to do with qualifications. Another uncomfortable truth. Sometimes getting a job has more to do with whether the interviewer simply likes you than with anything on your resume. Someone shared their hiring experience. They arrived dressed in business casual, expecting professionalism, and were greeted by an HR rep wearing a stained pink t-shirt, Jean Capri, and sitting at a desk buried under empty cigarette packs. She looked like she was having the worst Monday imaginable. He somehow still made a good impression, even though their vibes and presentation couldn't have been more different. It had nothing to do with credentials. It came down to chemistry, mood, and sheer randomness. Interviews are less about objective evaluation and more about two humans trying to feel each other out. For better or worse. Story 6. Karma doesn't have a schedule. We all want to believe karma is real, that the universe is keeping score and eventually the good will be rewarded, while the selfish and cruel finally get what's coming. But in real life, it rarely plays out that way. I've watched people lie, cheat, manipulate, and cut corners, and land on their feet every single time. Meanwhile, I've seen honest, hardworking people get crushed despite doing everything the right way. Waiting for cosmic justice doesn't punish the bad or protect the good. It just leaves you frustrated and stuck. Maybe karma exists in some grand cosmic trillion-year timeline, but here, in our human-sized lives, counting on it is pointless. You can't build your life on the hope that the universe is keeping receipts, because it isn't. Story 7. The universe doesn't owe you fairness, a truth that feels brutal until it suddenly becomes freeing. The universe has absolutely no obligation to give you what you want. Life isn't fair, it never promised to be. Most of our suffering comes not from hardship itself, but from the belief that hardship shouldn't be happening to us. We get angry because we didn't get the job, the relationship, the opportunity, and we cling to the idea that there should be justice in how things turn out. When you stop expecting fairness, life becomes strangely easier. You still pursue what's right, you still fight for what matters, but you stop being outraged when the world refuses to bend to your desires. And the highest level of acceptance, realizing that even when something wasn't your fault, you may still be the only one responsible for fixing it. It's deeply unfair, and yet it's the path forward. Story 8. Not everyone wants to learn, and it affects everyone else. Another truth people avoid is that some students simply aren't interested in learning, and forcing everyone into the same classroom doesn't magically equalize ability or motivation. It's like mixing a single infected zombie into a room of healthy people. It doesn't elevate the zombie, it drags the whole room down. I went to a school with ability-based classes, though they weren't labeled that way. The advanced group wrote 3,000-word essays. The average classes wrote 1,000. The remedial group wrote 500-word responses and focused on basics. Critics hated the system, but it worked. The kids who weren't college-bound weren't drowned in unnecessary coursework, and the kids who were academically driven got the challenge they needed. Not everyone learns the same way. Pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone. Story 9. Talent means less than the circumstances. You're born into one of the hardest truths people refuse to accept is how deeply class determines outcome. It doesn't matter how smart, kind, hardworking, or creative you are. If you're born into poverty, the odds of climbing out are brutally low. Upward mobility is the exception, not the rule. This is why rags to riches stories feel so misleading. Yes, those people worked hard. Yes, they deserve their success. But they are outliers, statistical miracles, in a world where millions of equally hardworking people remain stuck. Not because they lacked talent, not because they lacked effort, but because they didn't start the race in the same place. Story 10. Your life doesn't have a story. Arc. A truth most people spend their whole lives avoiding. There is no narrative structure guiding your existence, no 3-act arc, no destiny, no invisible author ensuring everything wraps up neatly. Existence doesn't come preloaded with meaning. You're the one who assigns it. Most people ignore this because the responsibility is enormous. If there's no script, then every decision you've ever made belongs entirely to you. There's no protagonist energy protecting you, no cosmic guarantee of a satisfying ending. You choose your values, your code, your path, and you live with the consequences. And sometimes that means recognizing that you simply can't coexist with people whose values fundamentally oppose your own. If one group prioritizes freedom and another prioritizes control, conflict isn't a misunderstanding. It's inevitable. Meaning is something we create, not something we inherit. Story 11. Everyone will die. Everyone. You, me, your kids, the stranger across the street. Everyone dies in the end. All of your struggles will only get you so far. And in the grander scheme of things, they won't matter at all. Our lives here are not permanent. Shouldn't we have the right to choose when we die? Shouldn't we try to love others? Shouldn't we try to protect our planet for the generations that haven't come yet? Everyone dies, and that's okay. Story 12. Being a great parent does not guarantee you a great kid. Being a crappy parent does not guarantee you a crappy kid either. Of course, you're hedging your bets by being a good parent, but it's by far no guarantee. This is at once terrifying to helicopter parents who are betting on the hope that being up their kids' butts will guarantee them a doctor. It's also pretty relieving to many of us who had crappy parents and are hoping the stink of that doesn't have to follow us forever. Don't worry. How well you parent is important. It's just not a guarantee. And don't worry, if you had bad parents, it doesn't mean you are destined to be a piece of crap, and please don't. Thank you. Story 13. There will always be bad in the world, we can only minimize it. As an example, even if we move towards 100% renewable energy, recycled as much as possible, and found the greenest ways to manufacture items, environmental damage would still occur. You need to extract the resources to build wind and solar farms. You can't just recycle forever. What we can do is ensure we harm the earth as little as possible so that it can recover faster than we hurt it. Story 14. I mention this all the time and get mad downvotes, but everyone with a brain knows it. We need to stop having so many kids. We're way overpopulated as is, and the earth is getting stretched thinner and thinner in terms of food and water and living space in some places. People always wonder, why are the Japanese not having babies anymore? Because they're smart. They already have a growing population of young adults living in sewers because they can't afford the insane prices to live anywhere else due to the high demand. Prime parking spaces sell for millions and rent for thousands. They are treated like house rentals. The Japanese have a lot of weird stuff going on, so that's not the only reason why they aren't having babies, but it's one of the major ones. Look at the farming industry. Watch any documentary about cow and chicken production, and you will want to puke. Why is that happening? Insane demand and profit to be had. Story 15. That a single-player video game with some kind of glitch or exploit that makes the player super rich, or a god makes the game super easy, does not need to have that glitch patched out. Because some players actually enjoy that kind of thing and actually actively seek out those glitches, because for them it adds to the experience. Nobody is forcing anybody to use that glitch, and nobody cares that you beat the game's punish me difficulty setting. If that's how you enjoy games, then so be it. Just don't try to bash me for using said glitches. Take your Git God and shove it where the sun doesn't shine. Story 16. There is a campaign against hate right now, as if human beings should hate nothing. We should hate things that are morally reprehensible. It's just we can't all agree on what is morally reprehensible. So the definition of the word hate is being changed and becoming politicized. For example, if you call someone a slur because of their race, that is hate or hate speech or a hate crime. But if you attack police because you hate the system or hate police, that isn't considered a hate. If you tear down a statue because you hate the founding fathers, that isn't considered hate. Story 17. That humanity is going to die out having barely made a mark on the universe. Most likely, the few remaining marks will never be noticed or found. Eventually, the universe will cease to exist or operate. Heat death. There is no grand plan or purpose to any of it. We are objectively irrelevant. Bonus flip side. What matters, therefore, insofar as anything can, is defined by our very subjective experience. So pet dogs that want to be petted, enjoy your guilty pleasures and be kind to people. Happiness is a wonderful thing, and we should aim to maximize it in the world around us. Try and make it as nice to be here as we can whilst we are here. Peace. I really like that our more permanent marks are satellites and also a Tesla Roadster with a spacesuit in it. Story 18. Is it weird that I find some of these strangely comforting? Like the idea that it'll eventually be dead and gone and forgotten is somewhat consoling to someone who's constantly terrified of being judged and disliked. Heck, even the messages that it's inevitable that some people will dislike you and you can do everything right and still fail seem gentler than if someone dislikes you, it's your fault, or whatever goes wrong in your life is a result of your own moral failing. I don't know, there's just something comforting about accepting inevitability. Story 19. My papa has cancer. He's not strong enough to survive chemo or surgery. Realistically, they don't believe he will make it past this summer, but ever since I've been home to help, away from college, he's been on an upswing. Sometimes I forget he has cancer, but I catch myself more these days thinking, what if he beats this? What if this isn't it? What if hell actually still be here for my graduation, or my wedding, or my first child? I don't know how I'll deal with it. I know death is inevitable, but I can't imagine a world without this man. I'm not ready to accept that yet. Story 20. Just how insignificant humans are in the grand scheme of things within the universe. We aren't even comparable to a speck of dust when it comes to that. We are so much smaller than that. Our nations can fight until the human race dies off, or we can travel as far away from Earth as we want and colonize every planet, but we will never be comparable to the universe. Taking all of that and thinking about how your friend has done it with your girlfriend, or how your car broke down, etc. It is a miracle people get out of bed at all. It's the hardest truth to accept. Most people have existential depression that is sometimes permanent because they can't accept that fact. It's also the reason people flood to religion. It's harder to believe that no one truly matters than to believe in some sort of being that will save us from anything. I would like to say I respect all religions, but once I became an atheist, that was the hardest thing to accept. I still feel down the more I think about it. Story 21. The harsh truth that humans refuse to accept is simply that we are not equal. We are not equal in any aspect. We all fill a need for a role, and none of which are the same. Choice is both the greatest and most formidable of all things. It shapes us, supersedes us, and decides what we fear and how well we succeed in life. You must meet whomever where they are in life. There is always a reason or a source that dictates human behavior, but reaction will always be individual. Story 22. The good old boy system of it's not what you know, but who you know, is a fact of life. You can complain about it being messed up or even corrupt. What doesn't change is it is how life works. It doesn't have to be bad though. Network and be both someone who takes and gives to that network. Embrace the good old boy system and let it work in your favor. Fighting against it will only result in you staying at the bottom for probably your entire career. Story 23. Most people who did crappy stuff to others don't deserve to be forgiven, and the whole idea of forgiving who wronged you to heal yourself is pure emotional blackmail that the same people hurting others promote to keep having free passes to be crappy human beings. That being said, those who are wronged have a responsibility to grow past the damage others did to them and heal from it, but that doesn't mean forgiving the other part. And obviously, there's a lot of minor crappy behavior and damage that humans cause to others because we are dumb as that, and for the most part, those are okay to forgive, unless it is a constant thing, but that is completely up to the wounded part, and they should never feel obligated to do it, because of inner growth or whatever stuff like that. Story 24. The universe owes you nothing. Not justice, not pleasure, not happiness. It's up to us to try and squeeze what we want out of this chaotic ocean of existence, and one person's ability to be happy doesn't mean they owe unhappy people something to make it fair. To add to this, your problems and woes are completely relative to your own life. If you've lived a happy and sheltered life, you might have a genuine problem causing you upset, but you'll be made to think of people who have it worse. This is good to an extent, but that doesn't lessen what you're feeling, and you should never just negate your own emotions because other people have it worth. It's all relative. Story 25. Dying. It happens. Other animals accept this. They go lie down somewhere under a tree or behind a bush when they feel it coming. People build hospitals, create vaccines and medicines. Don't get me wrong, I do vaccinate my children, but seeing my mother, and 3 years later my father too, suffer through months of chemo makes me think that sometimes we must just accept the inevitable. Maybe I would have felt differently if either of them made it, and I'm sure I'll put myself through the same to have a chance to see my kids grow up. But it's definitely one thing humans struggle to accept. Story 26. Just because you're a jackass or a general jerk doesn't mean people will respect you or that you are a tough man. Being tough means you get the slaps from life, not you give them. Military personnel, people with mental disabilities, or anyone who constantly gets slaps from life are real tough, and not little craps who think it's cool to be a jerk. For example, I have depression, always get screwed over by life and karma, yet I'm not a jerk. I've learned to respect people even if they are jerks, as I know what it's like to be treated the same way. I can diffuse any situation, as I've experienced many fights and heavy arguments. I have, for example, lost my phone, yet wasn't a jerk to the teachers, and they handled me with the same respect I gave them, and that was honestly the only good thing in my life for almost a year. Also, am currently learning how to box as I may need self-defense on the streets. Just because you are nice also doesn't mean that no one can beat you up just because you are nice. Be nice, but tough, and understanding with everyone even if angry or just a 20 IQ neckbeard. And lastly, don't claim that you are tough. You yourself shouldn't claim that, but instead should deserve that title given to you by people. I didn't already want to claim I am tough. Hope I didn't once claim it in the text. Stay strong and smart. Story 27. That none of us actually matter or are nothing more than a mammal making noises. That human rights are social constructs. That much like human rights, morality is also a social construct, which tends to differ from culture to culture. Basically, no one's special and no you don't matter in the grand scheme of things. Side note, I figured I'd state something fairly extreme in the hopes to see some interesting arguments against these comments. I may or may not reply to comments as these statements don't necessarily reflect my views. Just looking to see some polite debate, and as always, please don't post hateful, bigoted, racist, or rude comments. Other than that, I look forward to some well thought out, creative comments. Story 28, that it was only ever going to be up to us, you and me, as to how this turns out. And if this is not true for you, then that is because you don't yet fully believe in the goodness of others, the goodness of most of us. Your world will never really change until you accept this truth, and when enough of us do, it will, in the proof of the pudding, as they say. But before we try that, first we have to try cheating and stealing from each other to see if that makes it better? Nope. Starting wars and killing each other? Nope. Dehumanizing humanity to such an extent that anything can be done in the name of winning? Nope. Because then we have to go all the way around the cycle again to get back to the point, the only bit where our voice can make a difference if we speak with one voice, which is now, before all that begins in earnest. The problem is, if the last cycle took about 80 odd years, and with climate change tipping points approaching, I just don't think we have that long before we already need to have changed. Apologies for the downer. Story 29. Someone once told me that your name can highly affect the ratio of how successful you want to be versus how much work you'll have to put in to be that successful. She was saying that bubbly, fun type names make it harder for you to gain professional respect as easily as someone with a stronger name. It was in the context of her niece being born, and when she found out what they named her, she told me, "Yeah, she's gonna have to work so much harder to get anywhere with that silly name." How true that is, I'm really not sure, but it sure has stuck with me. Story 30. Our entire way of life fundamentally depends on screwing over people in undeveloped and developing nations. Our way of life simply could not exist if we didn't have people we could force to work extremely long hours for basically no pay. Without that, there's no Walmart, no Amazon, no cheap food, no iPads or smartphones for everyone. Everything would have to cost way more, and things that are currently accessible to the average person would become luxuries only the rich could afford. Our world is basically Snowpiercer. Story 31. There's no one at the steering wheel. There's no predetermined course of history. There are patterns, and the decisions of individuals and groups determine what happens, but there's no one at the top. We don't have to make progress. Civilizations rise and fall. This is why people gravitate toward conspiracy theories, not because they're sensational or scary, but because, in an odd way, they're comforting in a world that is chaotic and scary. If things are in the gutter, because there's a few people on top pulling the strings, we can rationalize that and be mad or resigned or whatever. If things are in the gutter because at the end of the day, we're all hairless monkeys on a rock hurtling through space and can't figure out how to get along without hurting each other, out of our own collective ineptitude and a lack of guardrails, that's that part that's hard to really, truly wrap our heads around. There's no one writing the script. There's no one who can pump the brakes if there's a real meltdown. There's no one to hold our hands and guarantee it's all part of a plan. It's just us dumb space monkeys trying our best to survive and make sense of it all. Story 32, that Earth will keep chugging along with or without humans. All this talk about saving the Earth is bullcrap. It is really about saving humans and human civilization as we know it. Yes, there is global warming. Yes, there is the Great Garbage Patch. Yes, there is fracking and oil spills. Guess what? The Earth survived a meteorite hit so large it wiped out 99% of all life. Yet it is still here. People need to be more honest and just say humans are about to go extinct and that we need to fix the environmental damage so that we may survive the coming ages. Story 33. There are a lot of harsh truths in life and I'm actually writing a book based on them. However, I believe a lot of them can be turned on their head and with their knowledge can be used to live a life that isn't so harsh. The world is not fair. There is no just world. Bad things happen to good people. Bad people live fulfilling lives. You can do everything right and still fail. This, however, means that not everything in your life is your fault, and that you shouldn't be so hard on yourself. People define you by your actions, not your words. People treat you based on what you can offer to them, not by virtue of proclaiming how much of a great person you are. This mostly applies to the professional world, and there's a lot more lenience for friendships, however. Anyone who rejects you for frivolous things is not someone you want to associate with in your platonic and romantic lives. People like to think they're working hard, but are instead putting serious effort into procrastinating with an activity that will not net them the results that they desire. However, if you can put it in effort elsewhere, you can put an effort towards the right thing. The best time to do something or prepare for something is now. Waiting for that magic moment will have you waiting forever, missing out on life. It may seem like the most difficult thing to summon up willpower to do, but focusing on the here and now realizes the potential of humans to make amazing things happen. It is liberating. Your struggle will not necessarily be rewarded with something that will make up for what you've been through. Contrarily, that means you won't be punished for the mistakes you make. Looks matter to some degree. They always will, but luckily people respond well to things other than looks. People who judge you only by looks should be avoided. Story 34. Everything that we're doing to the planet and animals on the planet is a natural byproduct of the evolution of an organism. You can find parallels to it, although not to the same extremity within organisms in our environment. Look at certain species of ants. They modify their environment during what can be called cities and ant hills, and will completely and utterly decimate any resource necessary in order to continue to survive. This is not to say that we should not attempt to reduce these effects as much as we possibly can, nor does it mean that we should like it. We should accept the fact that we are a carbon-based survival machine, and our survival will require the removal or destruction of certain things to certain extents. Personally speaking, I wish we could move the entire planet population to another planet, but that's not an option, at least not yet. And we still have yet to catch up to the organism that has been the most destructive out of the entire Earth's history. One of the extinctions was caused by blue-green algae in the ocean being wiped out like 98% of life. Google major extinction events for further information of this extinction event and the other major extinction events on the planet and their causes. Story 35. Humanity as a species is not that special. In the context of the universe, we are just a tiny speck of dust in a boring corner of a galaxy no different than billions of galaxies that exist around. Our time as a society is not but a fraction of a second in the context of big time. Fungus had more time dominating Earth than us. If there are aliens advanced enough to travel time and space, there's no reason to stop on our pale blue dot. And the universe is so big and random that a benevolent God exists. In practical terms, we are alone and we're going to die alone as a species.